Last one, we're looking at Daniel's longest time prophecy, which is a very, very interesting one. Over 2,500 years old, this time prophecy is. So we'll be looking at what that is, when it started, when it finished, what happened throughout it, and what's yet to come, because there's more to come out of this prophecy than just where it ended. So let's have a word of prayer and we'll get started. Thank you, Lord, for your being with us this afternoon. Guide us and help us as we discuss this topic and learn from your word the truth, that we can be confident that and stable that your word is truth today, and that your book, this document, is valid. And we thank you for your blessings and it that we can read. We pray. Amen. All right, so just look at a couple of notes here. First of all, as it says there on the screen, the next three studies will unravel one of the most amazing and fascinating prophecies in the entire book of Daniel. It will reveal an event now transpiring in heaven that clearly indicates the approaching end of Earth's history. It will also reveal an event occurring in heaven right now, which brings exceedingly good news for God's people, but exceedingly bad news for the little horn. The message of Daniel and 8 is the climax of the message revealed in the book of Daniel. Here, Daniel gives us the longest time prophecy in the entire Bible. In order to understand Daniel's prophecies, it's necessary to employ correct principles of interpretation. We've discussed this before. There are prophetic guides and keys when it comes to looking at prophecy in the Bible, i.e. Daniel Revelation. Unless we use those keys, we're not going to get the full understanding of what's being said there. Many other Christian faiths and beliefs and scholars follow different principles when it comes to this, and when they come to a conclusion of the prophetic events, it's way off course. And this is the only way to correctly look at Bible prophecy using these principles. It's very important we look at them. One of the principles is repetition and expansion, or repeat and enlarge. Repeat and enlarge. We're going to see that through Daniel. We've done the story of Daniel. We did Daniel 2. Daniel 7 was a huge one. We just finished. Daniel 8 and 9 are similar material, but he's enlarged the content of what's being said. And that's important to understand. It's not different material. It's just he's added more information. God's given him more information and he's written it down. That's what repetition and expansion means. Here we go again. It simply means that Daniel continually goes over the same history, repeating the empires of the past, but each succeeding prophecy adds further details. Daniel 8 and 9 go through the same sequence as 2 and 7, portraying the empires of Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and the little horn. The focal point in Daniel 7 was the development of little horn, whereas the focal point of Daniel 8 and 9 is how God will bring an end to that terrible little character that we learnt so much about the last 4 studies. All right, get your Bibles out and your little study guide. We're going to start reading Daniel 8 from verses 1 and 2. Trev, we'll start with you, please. And let's go through these in sequence. Apologies for the projector. The bulb is starting to go. I'll get a new bulb next week. And it won't look so green. Daniel 8, 1 and 2. Thanks, Trevor.
Daniel 1, it says, in the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after the one that appeared to me in the first time. I saw in the vision, and it so happened while I was looking that I was in Shushan, the citadel, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in the vision that I was by the river Ulai.
All right, okay, so here's Daniel giving us some background here. It was in the 3rd year of Belshazzar. Belshazzar didn't last too long after this, by the way. At the end of chapter 8, Belshazzar's gone, as we learnt. The Medes and the Persians moved in, and Darius moves in at chapter 9. So this is very close to the end of the Great Babylon, the 3rd year of reign. So he's in vision again, as we've read. And he's in vision. Now, we're not sure, of course, whether he was actually in Shushan, the city. He just says, I saw in vision. and it so happened while I was looking that I was in Shushan. So whether he was looking at Shushan through a vision or he was actually physically at this place, you can kind of, doesn't really matter for the prophecy's sake, but you can look at it either way. I think it's more of a vision. I just put a little map up here of where Shushan is, so you can see how relatively where it is with things. There's Babylon, Shushan's over here, the Ulai River running through the side here, as you can see on the screen. All right.
Considering the second line of that, you'd think that, because it doesn't say the word vision in the first line, it does in the second line.
Yes, I saw in vision. So one would think that he was in Shushan in vision, not physically. But some scholars think it was physically. So it doesn't really matter for the content, as long as it remains in context, which is very, very important always at Bible study. But there's some interesting little nuances there that a lot of scholars differ about, but it doesn't really make any difference to the outcome of this vision or this prophecy, whether he was physically there, whether he was still in Babylon doing his chores, because you'll read pretty soon that he is in Babylon doing his chores. So to the kingly work that he was doing, because he was in charge, obviously, of the realm, as we know. So I don't think he shot back to Babylon to do that in this chapter. I think he was never really there. Rachel?
Wouldn't you say, though, that because Babylon was such a big empire, that's just Babylon the city, but it actually would be in control?
Oh yeah, look, Babylon was huge.
So
it encompassed that whole Middle East. It encompassed...
He could have been doing business in Shushan.
He could have been doing the king's business in Shushan. Yes, that's correct as well. Could have. All right, so the question asks, when did Daniel have the vision in Daniel chapter 8, verse 1? And it simply is in the 3rd year reign of King Belshazzar. All right, let's have a look here. This vision was given near the end of the Babylonian realm, like I just said. Interestingly, we will see that it did not begin with Babylon, but it began with Medo-Persia, which is kind of interesting. Daniel's in Babylon, he's doing the Babylon thing, and the next power we know, like in Daniel 2, is a chest of silver, which is Medo-Persia. So this vision begins with Medo-Persia, which shows us again that it's at the end of the Babylonian. It's Babylon's about to pass, Medo-Persia is starting, as we'll see as we go on. All right, next two verses 3 and 4. Thanks, Ros. What do they say?
And I lifted my eyes and saw, and there, standing beside the river, was a ram, which had 2 horns. And the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. I saw the ram pushing westward, northward and southward, so that no animal could withstand him, nor was there any that could deliver from his hand. But he did according to his will and became great.
Okay. All right, there we go. So the story continues. He's had his vision. He sees this amazing ram with 2 horns. One's higher, one's lower, and he explains what he saw. Now, pushing westward, northward, southward, what could that all mean? Verse 4 there. Conquering, yeah. He's kind of heading all over the place. Now, no one could withstand him. So it sounds like this ram was very, very powerful. Very interesting. So we're going to see some correlations going on here as we go. Questions asked there, of course, what kind of animal did he see? He saw a ram with 2 horns. All right, let's keep going. Next ones to read is 8:20. Daniel 8:20 is the next verse to read. We'll come back to our reading, but let's just see what's going on here. Who did the ram represent? Thanks, Paris. Who did the ram represent? 8:20, just so we get things in context straight away.
The ram which thou sawest had 2 horns, are the kings of Media and Persia.
Okay, we don't have to guess what the 2 horns are. There it is right there. 2 kings of Media, Persia. That's who they are. So Daniel's seen his vision of this ram, 2 horns, one high, one low, and the horns we just read represent the 2 kings of Media, Persia. We did all that in Daniel 2, if you remember. Yeah. All right. Let's get back to our reading. So we're going to go Daniel 8:5. What does that say? Steve, thanks.
And I was considering, suddenly a male goat came from the west, across the surface of the whole earth. without touching the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes.
All right, so now we've got a goat. We had a ram before. So it says here, what was the next animal Daniel saw? A male goat coming from the west, and he had a horn between his eyes. All right, that's interesting. Fierce looking animal. We want to get in the way of that horn. I've seen my goats ram each other. They haven't got a horn like that. Hard heads. All right, let's keep going. Let's see what's happening with the story. Daniel 8:21. Who did the rough goat represent? And what did the great horn symbolise, Di?
And the male goat is the kingdom of Greece. The large horn that is between its eyes is the first king.
Right, here we go again. No need to guess. We know straight away who this goat is and what the horn means. Bible interprets. It's its own interpreter, which is really, really good. Notice how the prophecy followed the same sequence as in Daniel 2 and 7. After Medo-Persia comes Greece. The notable horn represents the first king of Greece, which was Alexander the Great, just like we did in Daniel 2 and Daniel 7. So we can see straight away that it's not a new vision. It's the same vision, but we're getting more detail. We didn't get this detail about this goat flying through the air. Its feet weren't touching the ground. We know that Alexander the Great moved swiftly and conquered the lands very quickly, which is obviously what the representation of the goat flying through the air means. But we are getting more details. We know about the big horn and so on. All right, let's see how we go from here. Question number 6. Let's read back to Daniel 8 again, 8, 6 and 7. Thanks, Stuart.
And he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing before the river. And he ran unto him in the fury of his power. And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with anger against him, and smote the ram, and brake his 2 horns, and there was no power in the ram to stand before him. But he cast him down to the ground, and stamped him upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand.
Wow, sounds pretty serious. What did the male goat do to the ram? He conquered him. So from Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, we know the goat is who again? Greece. And we know the ram is who?
Persia.
Okay, and what did Greece do to Medo-Persia? Exactly what you just read. Pounded him. Stomped all over him, and he kept going. But we learn, of course, back in Daniel 2 that Alexander was only in his early to mid-30s when he died, and he actually died with a broken heart, among other things. He actually just buckled up, started crying, and got depressed and drunk himself into a stupor and died. And he was depressed because he had no more land to conquer. Crikey. And for a conqueror, I guess that's a difficult thing to handle. There's no more land to conquer. So, yeah, pretty crazy history there. All right, let's keep going. Question 7. Rachel, we're just going to read Daniel 8:8. What does it have to say?
Therefore the male goat grew very great, and when he became strong, a large horn was broken, and in place of it 4 notable ones came up towards the 4 winds of heaven.
Okay. What happened to this great horn and when it was strong? So at its strongest time, it broke, and then 4 others came up. So we know what this is all about. Do we understand what's going on here?
The horns represent power, so it's saying that someone went down and 4 others came up.
Okay, all right, good. Thanks, Rachel. Very good. And notice here 4 winds of heaven. Because that's important as what we're going to see pretty shortly, because this is again where a lot of Bible scholars start veering off and thinking it's different. I'll explain it when we get there. But I've highlighted 4 winds in that verse for a purpose. So in place of that one big one that broke, 4 notable ones came up toward the 4 winds of heaven. And the 4 winds of heaven mean what in the Bible?
North, south, east and west.
Pretty much the corners of the earth. So all over the place. And we know that Alexander the Great did conquer, as we just said, so much land, he had no more to conquer. All the way through to India, and who knows further from Europe. It wasn't Europe then, but from Greece as it was back then. Okay, well, let's get some more information. Let's fast forward. Daniel 8:22. Trev, what does Daniel 8:22 tell us? Because the question is, what was the meaning of the 4 horns that came up? So we've got to find out what they all are, just to be sure about this. What's the meaning of the 4 horns?
As for the broken horn and the 4 that stood up in its place, 4 kingdoms shall arise out of that nation, but not with its power.
Okay, so we know straight away. The 4 horns were 4 kingdoms that arose from that nation. In other words, the goat with the big horn nation, which we know is Greece. And 4 more arose out of that, but not with its power. So they rose independently of the Grecian power. And we know that. We know that simply because it says so, and here we go here. Alexander the Great conquered the world. This is all history. Alexander the Great conquered the world in a very short time period. At the age of 32, he died suddenly, the result of his own intemperance. The Grecian Empire, instead of being taken over by one person, was divided into 4 separate kingdoms. The kingdoms of Egypt, Thrace, Macedonia, and Syria. These 4 kingdoms were ruled by these 4 generals of Alexander the Great: Ptolemy, Lysimachus, Cassandra, and Seleucus. Handsome looking blokes. Rachel?
How did Alexander the Great die?
He died of drunken stupor one night
Oh,
after conquering all this land. Not sure where he was, but he made it all the way to India, so perhaps somewhere there. He drunk himself to death, is the story.
well, that's a story. It could also have been the cover.
Well, if there's these 4 blokes here that want power, who knows what could be
Exactly.
involved there. But history tells us that was the reason. We've done a lot of studies here about history not being exactly accurate, so who knows for sure. But all we know is that he died at a very early age, 32. He died suddenly, is the history, of his own intemperance, which means the story goes that he drunk himself into a stupor. Whether he fell, hit his head, or we don't know. But that's the story.
Someone poisoned him.
Or someone poisoned him or pushed him over.
Doesn't matter, he died.
Doesn't matter, he died. And this is why it says up here in 22, but not with its power. So it wasn't Greece's power that these 4 guys rose, because they end up being 4 independent groups. As you see here, this guy here, Ptolemy, he became Egypt. Or took over Egypt, I should say. Because Greece, remember, they owned all these areas. Remember, they had conquered it all. But they split into 4. The Grecian power split into 4. This guy here, Ptolemy, he took over Egypt. Lysimachus took over Thrace. Cassandra took over Macedonia, which is where Alexander was from, where he started his conquering from, Macedonia. I've been there. And Seleucus took over Syria. Rachel?
But they all come from the Greece.
Yes.
Yeah.
These are all Greek generals in Alexander's army, yes. And instead of one person taking over his power, they broke into 4. That's why it says not of its power. They actually broke into 4 independent powers, which is really, really interesting as history goes on. All right, let's look at the next question here. What did Daniel see coming out of one of the 4 winds of heaven? Remember I said I highlighted that thing back here about winds, 4 winds? What did Daniel see come up out of those 4 winds? Daniel 8:9, thanks. Thanks, Roz, thank you.
Therefore the male goat grew very great, but when he became strong, the large horn was broken, and in place of it 4 notable ones came up toward the 4 winds of heaven.
And verse 9 too, please.
And out of one of them came a little horn which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the glorious land.
Okay, so we're starting to build up now about some other power happening here. Now we've just spent the last several weeks talking about a little horn. I wonder if it's the same one. So the reason why I said earlier that this is important to understand this four winds of heaven is because of this word right here, them. A lot of Bible scholars say that out of them came a little horn which grew exceedingly great towards the southeast, towards a glorious land. Scholars say that the them is the four horns. Do you see that can be a problem? Because these four guys here that came out of the Grecian Empire, that became four independent empires themselves, Greece, Thrace, Macedonia and Syria, they're the four that took over. But when you read this verse 9 on its own, and you don't think of this here, it says, and out of them, out of the four winds, came the little horn. Otherwise, you can interpret it as out of the four horns that stood up came these four guys. Can you see the difference? Came this little horn. There's a difference there. It's important to notice. Because it can send you on a real tangent for tracing history.
I also feel like it wouldn't make sense with the rest of the prophecy as well, because it says that, in the sense of if it was to come out of the horn, because we see there's another beast yet to come.
Correct.
So therefore it can't be something that's come out of that horn, it's a different beast altogether. Correct.
Very, very true. But besides that, Rachel, a lot of scholars think otherwise and they'll refute it. No, the them is the four horns. So this little horn came out of those four guys and it must be this person or that person because history... No. That's when you start going on a tangent and end up in a wrong place when it comes to prophetic history. So the them that Daniel's referring to here is the four winds. Out of the four winds came this little horn. Okay, and it grew exceedingly great towards the south and east. What would the glorious land be, you think?
But doesn't that make a difference with the one of?
Sorry?
You wouldn't say out of one of the four winds. I mean, when I read that, it's out of one of those four generals.
That's how you're reading it?
When I read verse 9, that's how I see it.
Yeah, that's how many people see it. That's not how it is. That's what I'm saying. It's out of the four winds that this little horn grew. He didn't grow out of the four generals.
Why does it say one of?
Because one of the corners of that planet, one of the corners of the earth, the four winds represent the four corners of the earth. One of those regions, one of those areas, one of those four corners of the earth, he come out of.
Daniel, you're not very clear, mate. Sorry, you're opening yourself up there.
Well, he's opening himself up there, but that's how it's translated. And it kind of makes sense because if you notice back here, where were we? I'll just go back a bit. Strong, four winds. Where he said where he comes out of the east, the west. Where was that one? Oh boy, I'm going back a fair bit now. Here we go. I saw a ram pushing forward, north, west, north and south. There's no mention of east. You notice that? So that's important because when we get to this guy, toward the east, toward the south, towards the east and toward the glorious land. Now, that's really interesting because out of the wind, this little horn grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east. The little horn came from the west because Rome is west of this scene of taking place. So we know that this little horn came out of a corner of the earth, a fourth of the wind, thus one of them, because he comes from the west. And it fits into place when you follow the prophecy as to who this little horn power is. And that's why I point this out because as you've just read it yourself there, Stuart, it looks like it's coming from the horns. But when you look at the prophecy and we find out who the little horn is, you realise that little horn didn't come out of those four kings. He did not. He came out of one of the four corners of the earth, one of them, and he came from the west. That's why he went toward the east and toward the south and toward the glorious land, because he came from the west, as Rome is in the western.
I mean, I'm kind of with Stuart too, because the verses are right next to each other, so the context does look like that's what it's talking about.
Yep. Well, that's how it is correctly interpreted.
It does make sense.
We can see
when you read verse 8 and it says 4 winds, and then a few words after that, it is saying
one of them.
Out of one of them.
Yeah.
It's kind of referring. I can see how it also refers to the 4 winds.
It does. It refers to the winds, totally.
Especially when you read it in the Bible because it's closer.
It's if you didn't read about the 4 generals,
Yes.
you would be quite happy with that.
Yes. But no, that's...
The other thing too, we find that we've broken it up into verses where when it was originally put, it was just one story.
Yeah. There was no
just read on.
That's
It
right.
continues on.
And out of them came.
No grammar. Yeah, that's right. No commas, no full stops,
Yeah.
no verses. So it's definitely it's referring to the 4 winds, not the 4 horns.
And normally if you say "and out of," it would be the last thing that you spoke about. Not
Yeah, that's right. I just said, oh, by the way, out of that is what came.
I think Trevor's point's a good point, and I think, I can understand why we've got verses, because it allows you to be able to look things up, but it does change the context.
Yes.
Yeah.
Potentially it can.
It doesn't flow as smoothly as
No.
it would have originally written. Yeah.
If you just kept reading straight down of heaven and out of one of them,
Yes.
without that break.
And
Yes.
that's prophecy. You've got to delve into it, what happens a bit later on.
Yeah.
So then come back and say, hey, no, it didn't come out of one of them.
That's right. And that's the beauty of hindsight for us today. We know it didn't come out of those 4 generals. We know it. History tells us it came out of the 4 winds, one corner of the globe. So we know in hindsight. But I suppose people back then, when this was being written, and we'll soon see what Daniel says about all this.
Is this 4 winds spoken of here the same ones that are spoken of in Revelation that the angels are holding back the 4 winds of
Correct.
strife?
Correct. The 4 winds is simply an explanation of
Directions of the
the corners of the earth. The 4 corners of the earth.
Whole earth.
The whole earth. It's just an explanation that covers what that means. And of course, the north, south, east, west gives us a more of a better reference on compassing. Because he went to the south and the east, we know he came from the west.
Yeah.
Whereas the previous guys were pushing the west because that's where they were. So we see that there's quite a lot of information on this little horn in here. Firstly, he comes from one corner of the earth, and we know where he's pushing to and where he's heading. He's going toward the glorious land. That, of course, would be Jerusalem, would be the glorious land of Israel. All right, let's. That was good. What do we got here? Question 9. What did Daniel see coming out of of the 4 winds of heaven? A little horn. He saw a little horn coming out. Okay, well let's keep going. We'll get some explanations. Who did this little horn stand up against? Let's go 8:23 to 25. Who did he stand up against? Paris? Tell us.
And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressions are come to the full,
Is that the right one? 8:23.
Yeah, that's verse 22.
a king
Sorry, I'm looking at verse 7. Beg your pardon. Go ahead.
Keep going. A king of fierce countenance and understanding dark senses shall stand up, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power, and he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and destroy the mighty and the holy people. And through his policy he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand.
Holy smokes. That's quite a mouthful of what's going on here. Who did this little horn stand up against? The Prince of Princes. Now, we obviously know who that is. That's a pretty obvious thing. Anybody can really agree that that's Christ. But gee whiz, doesn't he get up to a lot of mischief, this guy? Latter time of the kingdom, when the transgressions of rich fullness. What was this part about? He will destroy, where was it? In peace. Where was that one? Then shall prosper, shall destroy many. Yeah, okay. He shall destroy many in their prosperity. He shall exalt himself in his heart. He shall prosper. He shall cause deceit to prosper under his rule. Holy smokes. This is an interesting fella. I wonder who it could be. The Prince of Princes is obviously the reference to Jesus Christ. The power here describes as the little horn stood up in the opposition of Jesus Christ himself. The power that crucified Christ was the pagan Roman Empire. History knows that. The next empire in the sequence of empires foretold in the book of Daniel. At this point, the little horn in Daniel 8:9 is none other than pagan Roman Empire at this point. So this is what they rose and did. Now history tells us that they did all of this stuff. Verses 20 to 24. They did all these things as it foretold with the Jews and their falling away and Rome taking over and all their sinister schemes and so on, and huge power. They did all these things and they prospered. Still are in a way. All right, let's look at the next one here. Did the little horn stay a little horn? 8:10. What does that say, Steve?
And it grew up to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and some of the stars to the ground and trampled them.
Okay. So, what are we here? Yep. Did the little horn stay a little horn, it says here. Did he stay a little horn? No, he didn't. He grew up to the host of heaven. So he became a very, very big, powerful little horn. He even cast down some of the host and some of the stars to the ground and trampled them. Not a very nice fella. All right, let's keep reading Daniel 8, 11 and 12 and see what keeps going with the narrative here.
But I'm a bit confused too by that last...
Let's have a look at it, Rachel.
Yeah, like, to the host of heaven cast down some of the host and some of the stars to the ground and trampled them. I mean, when I think of that, I'm thinking about like angels and things like this.
Yes. Yes, yes. True.
But also when we're talking about those last verses, it did sound to me like, you know, I guess like because we know too that the last beast is in bed with Lucifer or Satan.
Yes.
So a lot of the ways sound like him, you know what I mean? Because they're doing his bidding. So yeah, this verse is like, well, how did they do that?
Yep.
I'm intrigued.
Well, we'll see. It'll unlock itself. Daniel always does. It doesn't seem to make much sense on its own, but once we study it and thrash it out and see, like we've learnt already, the Bible tells us what the horns were, what the animals were. It'll tell us what this is as well. Let's have a look as we go on. Daniel 11 and 12. There's a few things here to fill out here. As the little horn grew up, what 5 things did it do? Di? Daniel 11 and 12. 8, 11 and 12.
Right. He even exalted himself as high as the prince of the host. And by him the daily sacrifices were taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Because of transgression, an army was given over to the horn to oppose the daily sacrifices, and he cast truth down to the ground. He did all this and prospered.
All right. So when we read back here in verse 10 that he grew up to the host of heaven, cast down some of the host and some of the stars to the ground and trampled them, does the next couple of verses give some more idea of what's going on?
Yes.
Absolutely. So...
And did that's because the temple did get destroyed.
Oh yeah.
And so they
Sure
weren't doing the sacrificial system anymore.
Absolutely.
And I do feel
It's
that
all stopped.
like, if the sacrificial system was still in place, like when Christ came, his sacrifice would have been more received for what it actually was, which is like the atonement for sin. Because you're seeing it in your daily life, you're seeing it as a practice with the temple. When you take that away, you're kind of hiding that, and like people don't see that link as easily.
Yep, that's right.
So he exalts himself to the level of Christ.
Yes.
That's it.
Yep. So he certainly, what did it say? He grew up to the host of heaven and cast down some of the hosts. You see how it's making more sense now. Exalted himself By him the daily sacrifice was taken away. Now remember what we just learnt back here, that who it's talking about here is none other than the pagan Roman Empire, right? So the little horn, so far that we've seen here, is pagan Rome. And pagan Rome did do all this stuff.
You could say too, because they did change, like we just were reading in our previous studies about changing the law.
Correct.
So they're pretty much just throwing the father down.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because they're saying...
And trampling.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because they're saying that what we say goes over
That's right.
Creator.
Yeah. Now, we learnt in those previous studies as well how this little horn went from pagan Rome to papal Rome. So it's one and the same character. It just changed hats. So, and we know the papal Rome system is the one who did all these things here. Yes, pagan Rome destroyed Jerusalem in AD 70. They deliberately sent firebrands inside the temple, that beautiful acacia wood, all that gold and acacia wood was made of, and just burnt the place, and the beautiful structure. That was pagan Rome, literally destroyed in AD 70. That's history as well. But we know that this business here, where exalting himself, taking it a daily, casting down a sanctuary, literally cast it to the ground, and he did prosper. We know that's because of hindsight, that it's the little horn power of the papal Roman system. So there's a transition happening here. It's one and the same power. This little horn that grew up and this one that continues is the same power, pagan shifting to papal. We know that because of history and what we've learnt here so far. All right, let's look at the note here. Obviously, we're not dealing with just pagan Roman Empire, as I've tried to explain just then. In the latter days of the Roman Empire, the little horn changed form. It became a religious political power. We saw that last lesson, didn't we? We even saw it in Daniel 2. That cast down the truth of God to the ground, practiced and prospered and destroyed the truths of God's sanctuary. In the following sequence of Daniel 7, the next power after pagan Rome is papal Rome. Daniel 8 uses the same symbol to represent both powers, indicating the connection between pagan Rome and papal Rome. Likewise, Daniel 7 indicated that the little horn grew out of the dragon. Rachel, you said that before. The little horn grew out of the dragon. We all know who that is. Thus, the little horn in Daniel 8 represents Rome in its two stages of pagan and papal Rome. See that connection there? It's one and the same, it's just two stages. We've learnt that through our studies. And again, imagine now, Stuart, that we took the angle that this little horn came out of those four kings. Where would we be in the prophetic time period then? Who would we be talking about? No king rose out of those four kings that did all this. You see? So we've got to be really on point and keep in context when it comes to Bible study, because if we go a different way, when it comes to just 3 verses later, that was 8, we're in 11 and 12 now, it's like, hang on, let's just say some king came out of the 4 kings. I don't know, let's just make one up. King Jupiter or whatever. And he did all this stuff and rain and whatever else, but hang on, did he do all this? Well, no, he didn't. So we need to take Scripture as it is and look at it through that lens. It's very important to follow it in sequence and keep in context, because this is a very, very particular power, as the note describes right here. Pagan Rome becoming papal Rome, one and the same person. Daniel is describing here in Daniel 8, 11 and 12. Important to understand. All right, let's move on. Today, instead of Jesus being the absolute central figure of the church, the little horn power has put in purgatory. Who's heard of that? What does purgatory mean, just quickly?
It's just like a place between heaven and hell, or like where you can potentially make your way to heaven or something like that.
Okay, so it's a parking lot before you get to heaven. And has it got meters in this parking lot?
I don't know.
Has it got meters, parking meters there? They do charge. My poor daughter got a parking fine at Gold Coast last Sunday. She crossed one of those she was parked one of those little yellow lines, $201 fine. She's not impressed.
I
So,
thought you said it doesn't have minions.
oh no, parking meters.
Okay.
There's parking meters in purgatory, I can assure you. You've got to pay pretty richly.
Well, I could say that it's not biblical and it's fictional.
Absolutely. Transubstantiation. What does that big word mean?
Don't know.
Transubstantiation basically means with the Eucharist and the Mass that it can convert something into, when you substitute something and you transubstitute something, you convert it into something else. And of course the Mass, the Eucharist, the little round wafer disc, which we'll get into one day what that really is. The round wafer disc, it gets transferred into Christ's literal body. Literal body. And the wine gets transferred into his literal blood. So when they do their service, their Mass each week, you are actually killing Christ and partaking of his body literally. That's what transubstantiation means. What does mediatrix mean? This is another new word that's come into this group. Mediatrix, yes. It's not just Mary, it's actually being in the middle of, or having someone between two. And of course it is Mary who plays that role. She's the mediatrix. She's between God and us. So all these teachings, as Rachel correctly said, are not found in the Bible. So remember back here it said he exalted himself as a prince. He took down the daily. The place of his sanctuary was cast down. He cast down truth to the ground and he prospered. Well, these are the sort of things, this first line up here, are some of the things that he did, as we know in history, and knowing who little horn power is. From Greece to pagan Rome, to papal Rome. Pagan Rome had many gods and deities of their own, but when they took over Greece and saw how Greece had all their gods and deities, Rome liked the gods of Greece, because Greece had all sorts of gods. And so Rome said, you know what, we like your gods. They're kind of masculine and pretty strong and powerful. We got our own. So Rome adopted the Greek gods and made them their own gods and brought them into their god system. This is all history as well. For example, Zeus, this fella here, who's the god of thunder and lightning, Ares and Hercules were all Greek gods. Very, very well-known gods for mythology, but nonetheless they were all gods according to the Greeks and in mythological. So Zeus became Jupiter, Ares became Mars, and Hercules became Hercules, which was the Roman gods. So they just transferred them. They just took actual Greek gods, said, hey, you know what, we like those three. Those three gods are pretty cool, and we're going to translate them and call them ours. And if you look at Roman gods, there's Jupiter, there's Ares, there's Mars, there's Hercules, and many others as well. So when pagan Rome became papal Rome, and there were all these temples and statues everywhere, they took on the Christian flavour. Remember? Pagan Rome turned religious and became papal Rome. So you've got all these statues of all these gods everywhere with all these names, and you've got all these temples dedicated to these gods. They're all pagan worshippers, and they're beautiful temples. You can see them. You can go online and see them all. Some destroyed now, but some are still in place. So when they became Christian, inverted commas, they took on a Christian flavour. They just shifted those same gods over to make them Christian deities. They became St. Peter, St. Paul, and Mary, and they began to worship them. The same gods. As pagans, they always worshipped the sun, so Sunday became the Christian day of worship. Now this guy over here is in the Basilica in the Vatican. There's a statue there, they say it's St. Peter. And you can go there, and I've got a picture of his foot sitting out over the edge of his little stool there. It is worn out. I don't know whether it's made of iron or stone, this statue. I think it's iron. And it's totally, his toes are just worn out from people touching it and kissing it over the years, remarkably. And it says here, of course, touch St. Peter's foot in Rome. Well, this guy's actually Jupiter with a sun disk on his head. Can you see that sun disk there? You can Google that. It's probably not a bad image because of the background, blends in. But this actual statue was a statue of Jupiter, which is of course, the Roman god. He took over Zeus. I beg your pardon. He took over Hercules. Yeah, Zeus became Jupiter. That's right. Zeus became Jupiter, and he was in the Roman pantheon, temple, and they picked it up, brought it over to the basilica in Rome, put it there, and slapped on it and said, "This is St. Peter. Come and kiss his foot." So that's basically how it went. All their feasts and festivals that are celebrated, for example, Christmas, Easter, All Hallows or Saints' Day, which is Halloween, are all transposed from their pagan roots to the papal church of today, which is super interesting. A lot of people would make a big fuss about this and say, no, it's not true. Well, it's history. You can't erase history. That's exactly what it is. And people know who this statue of Jupiter is because it's in pagan temples, just like that, with the sundial on its head. Let's look at some more situations like this. Pagan deities to pagans are androgenic, which means they can be male and female at the same time. Male or female, or male and female, which is interesting because what's the world got a situation of right now with this situation?
Fluidity.
It's a household word now, Stuart. Who would have heard of that word 10, 20 years ago?
Never.
Fluidity. Rachel?
I just also think of like the Baphomet, which is both female and male at the same time.
All pagan deities are androgenic, so therefore they can be both sexes. They can interchange. They can be one or the other. They can become both. They can just shift again. So it doesn't really matter who or what they are. They're androgenic, and you see that in this little horn's power and the little horn statues. We just saw it quite clearly there, how they've just simply taken these pagan gods and made them St. Peter and Paul and Mary. Well, this is interesting, because this is not a very good picture, but there's a picture of Mary there holding a lightning bolt. It's a zoomed in picture, so therefore it's not really good. But she looks like it's a piece of rag, but it's actually depicting a lightning bolt. And that's really interesting because the Zeus god of thunder also holds lightning in his hand. Coincidence? Maybe. Well, let's have a look at another one. This is the Greek god Poseidon with his trident. He was the god of the sea, being the big fork, the god of Poseidon. Well, here's Mary with little Jesus with a trident on his head. Coincidence? Maybe. Interesting though.
If, like all those statues that we saw before, and kind of 3 or 2 out of the whatever 4 there, if you ask 1,000 people what gender they are, they get it right. But they come out and say, "Oh no, they can be either."
They can be either.
It's this thing about defying reality.
Yeah. What's interesting here is that this little hand symbol, which is very, very common, you'll find a lot of. Well, I think. Yeah, Peter's doing it.
Baphomet does it.
Yeah, it's a very. We'll go into it one day. It's a very, very pagan symbol.
With Baphomet, he
And
does
what it means.
one with the fingers pointing upwards and one with them pointing downwards. And it's that as above, so below kind of thing.
Situation.
You see Winston Churchill?
Winston Churchill? Yes. Oh, look. Yeah. Where? We saw that last lesson, didn't we? That how it's all interweaved. Yeah. And also, you'll also see it quite often, they hold a disc. And that's actually the globe, which means I'm in charge of this ball. It's very pagan as well.
These gods can either be male or female.
Yes.
Means it allows you to believe whatever you want. You
Absolutely.
can't be wrong.
Absolutely. Anything goes. Rachel?
I was just thinking about how in our modern society, how like everyone, not everyone, but the big chunk of society, everyone's got to do the 2 fingers up, like the peace sign, or I'm doing this sign, and it's like, but they're not particularly meaning peace when they do that. Yeah. And it just looking back at all this, it's like you can see how they've kind of brought it into society and normalised it.
We should do a study on signs, Rachel, and You know, like people poking their tongue out and opening their mouth. Yeah, this sort of business. The Rolling Stones, one of their very early albums, this big tongue coming out, Rolling Stone. You'd be amazed what all that means.
Yeah, I was shopping today and I've noticed a lot of the clothes have the sun on them.
Yes.
And a lot of these signs are out in the clothing
Yes,
now.
they are. In children's clothing too.
Yes, and I thought this is, you know, they're telling us, trying to get a message through to us.
Yes.
That this is all good stuff.
Yes, yes.
But I picked up I looked at a beautiful dress and thought, it's
Yep.
got a sun god on it.
Yep.
And that was just
Yep.
one. And I
Amazing.
thought, oh, this is everywhere.
It's amazing.
So it makes you a bit choosy when
It
you
does.
go.
It actually narrows down what you can buy when you look at it that way. Even my work shorts, I got these black work shorts. They're real nice drill shorts with pockets in the sides and real cool looking shorts. And I bought 3 pairs of them. They're great work shorts. And the first time I wore them, after I took them off to change, they came inside out, as sometimes they do. And on the inside of the pocket was a huge red bull with big horns and a nose ring on the inside of the pocket. And you're going, you got to be kidding me. What's with that? So it's everywhere. Needless to say, I threw them out. I mean, it might sound silly, but...
Well, these clothes are very colourful, so it draws you.
Yes, it draws you there.
Just something to take notice of.
Interesting,
And
interesting.
plus they're busy, so you might not see.
Yeah, very busy.
And yeah.
It's subtle, isn't it? Remember we talked about deception?
Yes.
It's deception for
And
a
it's
reason.
over
It's subtle.
time, and it's multi-generational, and it's in the schooling, and it's subliminal, and it's like,
Yeah.
and then you go, I was on the other side of the fence, and I did a lot of art, and the art that I did was like, I would do eyes, and you know how that's a strong symbol,
Yes.
you know, look at the Illuminati and all that kind of stuff,
Yes.
and it's just like, I wasn't consciously connecting to that.
No, you weren't.
I was subconsciously connecting to
Yes.
it, and now that I'm not there, I'm not
Yes.
in that programming, I look at other artists and
Yeah.
I see how they're all
Yeah.
drawn to the same kind of symbology
Yeah.
that I was drawn
Yeah.
to as well.
And you're correct in saying for the most part, those artists don't know their origin. And that's what deception is, that if you play a deception game for, say, a decade, you've got a whole new group of people you're dealing with. Because the previous guys know, but these current guys don't know. So it's like you're taking a switch and going, okay, this 10-year block of human beings are going to be doing and believing and thinking this way. Those prior, we don't really care because they're almost out anyway. But the next ones are going to be doing different now. So you just think of what's going on in the schools. We discuss it in the schooling now, where you have, for example, drag queens coming and reading to kindergarten kids.
What's that going to do?
What's that block of kids going to think in 10 years from now? That's normal.
Yeah, and it's also, it was funny because not funny, but there was a post that went up just recently and they said, well, why not read to aged people or, you know, these other groups of people, why is it just children?
Yeah,
And it's for this purpose. It is
Interesting.
for a programming
Interesting.
purpose to normalise it.
Interesting.
And you see that it is working because you see these phenomenal shifts in the statistics of how things are changing and the perceptions changing because of these kinds of things.
Yeah.
If you tried that with old people, they'd show you the door roof.
They'd probably show you more than the door, I reckon.
So you see all the young kids now, they got that new symbol. It's still 2 fingers, but it's a different symbol.
Yes.
Now.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. We'll do symbols one day, 'cause that's
All the time.
amazing. I mean, like I said, you'll see this globe holding a lot going. There's obviously a crucifix on there, but the 2-finger business and the lightning bolt. You know, you're like your lightning bolt in general. Like there's clothing. Who's got the lightning bolt?
Oh, the lightning bolt
Sports clothing.
It's also a symbol that is used in the occult world as well.
Of course,
And
it all comes from Zeus.
because I've done a lot of study on symbols.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's...
It was trendy to get lightning bolt done down the side of your hair here with some of the boys, and they were short back and sides. Lightning bolt cuts. My son had it once.
Even I'm thinking about when Lady Gaga, the first song, I think was Poker Face, and what was over the eye?
Yes.
A lightning bolt.
Lightning
So straight away, the one eye symbolism,
Oh, the one eye symbolism.
and the lightning bolt, and there's questionability about the gender there too. So,
Well, look at the recent games with gender. Look at that bloke taking the lights out of that woman boxer and the runners and the swimmers. And did you get that meme about some of those Olympiads holding up their medals like this?
Oh, no.
Did you see that? Like 15, 20 of them. And smiling. And they're not just one or two, a whole bunch of them, all different countries. So interesting.
But you know
stuff.
why? Because it's just like back in the Roman days with the Colosseum.
Yeah.
Give the people the games and keep them distracted.
Yes.
So all this sports is distraction to keep us,
Interesting.
under subjugation to them.
Interesting. Why are we doing this? Because we're looking at how this little horn brought the sanctuary down, raised up to heaven, brought the host down, brought the stars, basically trampled on God's church system and how God wants church to be run. That's what we're looking at this. This I found this really interesting as well. This is satanic origin of the heart symbol. So here are 6 of, and they're all Masonic and satanic by nature, these heart symbols, and they all stem from this place. And this fella, Quetzalcoatl, whatever that is, was Lord of life and death.
It's Quetzalcoatl.
There you go,
Like
Quetzalcoatl.
that. And I've watched things on this too because he was a serpent, a winged serpent god.
Wow, was he?
So, who was the winged serpent?
Interesting.
When we go back
Interesting.
to the Garden of Eden.
There you go.
So-
I only found this the other night, actually. There you go, Quetzalcoatl, the Lord of life and death, in the Aztec and Toltec culture. So you see how far back these things go. So we're talking about generational things. Like back then, it was this. It was who this guy was. He showed his heart from inside, and this is what you did. And from there it grew, and it's used in this symbolism of satanic and Masonic symbolism. And you think, wow, who would have thought? I had no idea when I first saw this statue what that meant until I read the writing underneath it. But look how things... Rachel.
I just wanted to say that, yes, when I was on the other side, I had connected to Jesus, but it was a ascended master Jesus. It wasn't the Jesus of the Bible.
Yeah.
And I drew him with his thumbs up and wearing a hoodie, and he had a love heart on the hoodie, and in the hoodie was an eye.
Okay.
I'm just saying that when you're looking at this symbolism, this is what we're seeing. Yeah.
But it's interesting how this stuff and its roots, for example, Zeus holding thunder, Mary holding thunder, Poseidon holding a trident. We see it here with Jesus and a trident. This heart business here, where it stems from, what original things it came from, because we have this, which almost every religious person can identify pretty quickly. You see this almost everywhere, and that is the litany of the Immaculate Heart. And of course, through this church system, this is the idea of its being Mary's wonderful heart.
She's making that hand gesture too.
Of course she is. Same things.
Because it can be male or female.
Male or
And
female.
You also see,
Androgenic.
You also see Catholic versions of Christ
Yes.
the same way, because I actually had a figurine of Jesus. This is before I was the Bible believer and stuff, but I was connecting to Jesus in a false form.
In a feminine sense, was he?
And it had that kind of Sacred Heart, or whatever they call it.
So you'll see the Sacred Heart symbol and all the images you see, and even the icons, it's exactly the same as these ones. So this is just a little glimpse. We'll do signs one day, because it's just really, really amazing what's out there. I'm mindful of time, so we'll just keep going. What are we up to? We're up to question 13. As Daniel contemplated all that he had seen in this vision. So he hasn't seen so much what we've just seen here, but he's been told, and in vision we saw what was read back then in verses 11 and 12, what this little horn's going to do. So in vision, Daniel was actually shown what this little horn's going to do. We've got it here in hindsight to look at now, but Daniel would have known about these, not so much these gods, the Greek gods, he wasn't around then, but they were definitely Babylonian gods. But he was shown how the temple's going to be destroyed. He was shown how God's law is going to be broken down, how this power is going to raise up and exalt himself as being God. Daniel was shown all this stuff. And as a Hebrew, what happened to him? 8:13. Who's next to read? Daniel 8:13. Thanks, Stewie. What does Daniel 8:13 say?
Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to that certain one who was speaking, how long will the vision be concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, the giving of both the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot?
Okay. So like I said, 11 and 12 we read, he even exalted himself to the Prince Most High. By him the daily sacrifices were taken away. The place of his sanctuary was cast down. So to Daniel as a Jew, what? The sanctuary? What? Pulling down the prince, the great Emmanuel who is to come. You can imagine, as a Jew, Daniel's heart is racing because of the transgressions, and an army was given over to this horn to oppose the daily sacrifice. You can't take away a daily sacrifice. Just think Jew right now, because this is what he's been shown in vision. He's really freaking out. Cast out the truth down to the ground, and he prospered. And then he says, then I heard a holy one speaking. And another holy one said to that certain one who was speaking, how long will this vision be concerning the daily sacrifices and the transgression of desolation, the giving of both the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot? So Daniel's going, these two people speaking, you heard these two people speaking, he's going, how long is this destruction going to go on for? This is horrible. Okay, let's have a look. As Daniel has seen the sequence of empires, Medo-Persia, Greece, pagan Rome, and papal apostasy, and all the terrible deeds committed by these powers, remember, God showed him through a vision right down the system through to the papal apostasy. The question was asked, how long shall be this vision concerning the day sacrifice, the transgression, desolation, etc.? In other words, Daniel heard two holy beings talking in heaven, and one asked the question, how long will this vision be that begins with Medo-Persia and ends with papal Rome? That's what this verse is all about. Well, let's see what happens. Daniel 8:14. Who's next to read? That you, Rachel?
Yep.
The very next verse. What's that say?
And he said to me, for 2,300 days, then the sanctuary shall be cleansed.
All right. So remember, we just had two heavenly beings speaking with each other. Daniel's listening to this conversation because he's in vision. And he says, how long are they going to trample on God's law like this? For 2,300 days, then the sanctuary shall be cleansed. All right. Before we go there, I just want to back up a section here. In this section through here where it says, the giving of both the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot. The sanctuary we're going to learn about in our next study. So I think a lot of us know about it anyway, but we'll do that. But who's the host talking about here? Both the sanctuary and the host was trampled underfoot. Who's the host?
Well, I know that, like we often hear that the Father is called the Lord of Hosts.
Yes.
So I presume that the host, because I mean, I think it's also another word for army, but also, so I'd say that like his creations.
Yep.
That's the host.
Yep. Well, the host of the sanctuary is God.
Yeah.
And Jesus, of course. The whole sanctuary services, we'll find out, represents Jesus. So the host, God, Jesus, the whole system is trampled underfoot. And these two angels are asking, and this one gets answered, it's going to last this long. And we've seen this chart before, earlier in our studies. We looked at this 2,300 days, then the sanctuary shall be cleansed. And we'll look at this chart in a little bit more detail later on. We'll just go to the note here and see what it says. Now, 2,300 little days is a little less than 7.5 years. It's actually six years and 7 months. That's not a long time for all these events described in Daniel 8 to take place. According to Daniel 8, 2,300 days would encompass Medo-Persia and all of their realm. It'll encompass Greece and all of its time period. It'll encompass papal Rome and all its time period. Obviously, we're not dealing with 2,300 literal days, but 2,300 years. Now again, if you're going to study, and a lot of theologians have taken this literally, and they've gone days, and they've gone 7.5 years, and ended up in all sorts of places.
What's at the end of that? Nothing.
I didn't go down that rabbit hole, but I'm sure it's nothing there.
Did the early Protestant reformers understand the day year?
Yes, absolutely. And when we come to that,
none of it makes any sense.
when we come to that study, we'll see that all of the reformers, every single one of them, right back to Huss and Jerome and all the early ones, they all understood the day year principle, which is what we're getting to here. And this timeline shows us, of course, what it all means, and we'll get to this a little bit later on. Just mindful of time for our meeting this afternoon.
I think we should do the next question, because it is in line with that.
It is in line. Let's go to the next one. All right, Ezekiel 4:6. How do we get this time business out of the Bible? Is it just something you make up, or is there actual reason for it? Let's see. Ezekiel 4:6. Trev, that's you. Could you read that for us, please?
And when you have completed them, lie again on your right side. Then you shall bear the iniquity of the house of Judah 40 days. I have laid on you a day for each year.
Okay, so what's going on here is how long would it... yes. What does the Bible support... How does the Bible support the use of a day for a year prophecy? And it absolutely does. And this, of course, is during the... we know this story. They were in the desert, the wilderness experience. This is them collecting manna as it was falling. Nice little picture I found. And so because they didn't believe and didn't have faith, 40 days became 40 years because I laid on you this curse, you could say, because you wouldn't believe on me. So there's one example. There is another one here as well. What does Numbers 14:34 say, Paris? Ros?
According to the number of the days in which you spied out the land, 40 days, for each day you shall bear your guilt 1 year, namely 40 years, and you shall know my rejection. So
again, we see a similar understanding here. It's not prophetic, it's literal. It got changed. So because you did it for 40 days, I'm going to lay on you a year for a day, and again in that story there as well. In Bible time prophecy, 1 day is symbolic of 1 year, and that's right through, as Stuart said. All your biblical reformers know this principle and understand it to be true. This principle fits very clearly with the context of Daniel 8. Rachel.
I'm just reminded too, like when we're talking about this kind of principle, like thinking about the dreams that Pharaoh had with the skinny sheep and the fat sheep and the skinny corn and the healthy corn and the skinny corns, and how the numbers, there were things, but then they ended up representing a year. So we see that it's not just reflected in this one way as well. That a day is reflected of a year, but it's kind of like the sum of things has often been a reflection of a year.
Yeah. And it's those keys that you need to understand to unlock Bible prophecy, because if you don't, like I said, seven years and 4 months or whatever, where do you end up? I mean, how on earth do you get 3 global powers and squeeze them into 7 years? It's just a mess. We're going to have to close there, so we'll... any questions before we do that? Steve?
Oh, no, just an observation, I guess, not maybe a question that, all throughout this time, we've seen here tonight that there's the Satan's, behind everything, but all the time there was a people following God that was aware of this and fought against it. Just help me out here, the Waldensians, when were they around?
When were they in?
Yeah, when were they, like the 100 AD sort of thing? Yeah?
Yeah. We're over 1,000 years.
Yeah.
But,
that's right, so that whole period there that the Catholic Church was really, forcing their dominance on things, and the early structure of the Catholic Church
Yeah.
Well, these guys were, you know, they had the Bible to go by, it was the Bible only, and they knew all this. And it's just making me aware of the times that we are in now. You know, that there's those times, but there's you know, the Catholic, you know, dark ages,
Yeah.
but those ages are soon to become on us again. You know, so the importance of
It certainly looks that way, doesn't it? It certainly looks that way. It does, very much. We're going to close in prayer because the guys are here to line up. Let's have a prayer. Dear Lord, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. Help us and guide us to understand and to come back again next week to learn more about your truth, we pray. Amen. Thanks, everybody.